All right, everybody, it's time for the final member of the Big Three. This is about how Pokemon gets you to buy its starter decks. This is the Sun and Moon Team-Up deck Relentless Flame theme deck, and just a quick disclaimer here, this isn't actually going to be a breakdown of the deck. I mean, I am going to quickly show off the cards, but rather than a deck breakdown, this is more an analysis of the presentation that Pokemon gives to its cards, and specifically its starter decks and how it gets people to buy them. Now, unlike the other games I've talked about on here, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh!, and Wii Cross, what Pokemon has going for it is a little thing called brand recognition. Yes, brand recognition. What it does is it's based on a property and it expects people who know Pokemon and like Pokemon take a look at it and they are, hey, I know that thing. I know what a Charizard is. I'm gonna buy this deck. Now, the difference is, I know that Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic, they definitely have brand recognition, but the thing about those games is that the card game is their brand, and that's different from Pokemon in several ways. Pokemon sells itself more like how the Dragon Ball game sells itself, or how the Naruto game sold itself, or how a massive glut of games that appeared in the early 2000s did, is they expect you to recognize the property and hope that that's enough to get you to buy. Yeah, the early 2000s was a truly dark time for trading card games because after the success of the Pokemon trading card game, everybody was like, oh, hey, we should make our own trading card game. So you got everything from the Austin Powers trading card game and trading card games for G.I. Joe and all that sort of thing. Like pretty much anything you could imagine had a trading card game attached to it. Even the Bible got one. I think I've mentioned that before. It was called Redemption. But yeah, there were a lot of tie-ins that were basically trading card games for other brands, and they were like shovelware from other video games. So when it comes to brand-based card games, like the Transformers game, which I've heard mixed things about, people who have been playing card games for any considerable amount of time, people like me, tend to approach those kinds of card games, they tend to be pretty leery of those kinds of card games because leery in the way that most people would be leery of a video game based on a movie. You know, that sort of thing is a lot of the games frequently don't have the quality needed to sustain themselves and frequently die off without getting a single expansion, maybe one or two if they're lucky. Like the Yokai Watch card game was a pile of garbage, and it did not make it past its base set. So you have to still make a quality game, and fortunately Pokemon is one of those games. Unfortunately, when it comes to selling their cards, Pokemon is probably either the worst at it or the best at it, depending on how you look at it, because their starter decks are by far the weakest. Their starter decks are, they don't really attract old fans. And if you ask me, a starter deck should attract fans both old and new, but it is definitely a way to draw in people who are either new to the card game or younger children, or people who have been out of the game for a while and see their favorite character on the front of a deck box and are like, hey, I know that character, maybe I'll try playing the game again. The reason I picked Charizard in particular is because Charizard is one of Pokemon's big four. Those are Pikachu, Charizard, Mewtwo, and Eevee. Those are the four most popular Pokemon in the world, to my understanding. I mean, pretty much anything else, all of the most of the other legendary Pokemon, all the other starters, stuff like Gardevoir and Lucario, those are like tier 2 favorite Pokemon, but Charizard, Pikachu, Eevee, and Mewtwo are the tier 1 favorite Pokemon, so I guess it makes sense to see Charizard on the front of a deck for Team Up. Although, oddly enough, it's Venusaur who gets the tin treatment. Now, here's the thing about how Pokemon usually... I mean, the starter decks have improved in the past couple of years. A few things have changed about how the starter decks have done. For the longest time, what you got was a starter deck, which is... I'm just going to say right now, Pokemon starter decks tend to be garbage. Unlike the ones for Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is like a sampler of pretty good cards that you'd have to buy multiple copies of in order to make a good deck out of it. But Pokemon starter decks are, frankly, they're really bad. They do not resemble the kinds of decks that people are using in the actual professional scene. A lot of people want the Pokemon GX, which are the really powerful Pokemon that are worth double points if they get knocked out, which is what the risk reward for them is. But never has any of these starter decks contained any of those Pokemon EX. I've heard that some of the decks in Japan actually do, but in the case of the American ones, they don't. And in this case, they're like sort of like meant to be like part of an ensemble. Like you buy this, and then you buy like the tin or the special like gift box set that contains like the Charizard GX that can just go straight into the deck. You basically like are supposed to buy these other really expensive sets to make the deck worth using. And you know, I can't say I'm a big fan of that business strategy. I mean, I don't mind like the special box sets because it means that they can put out cards for like regular like fan favorite like other Pokemon without having to like commit to like making a big tin or something like that. But they're a bit garish if you ask me. Although that's another thing about making a card game based on brand recognition is that they frequently double as collectible cards. Like people might collect all of the different versions of their favorite character, and that's another thing that can happen with brand appeal. Like a lot of people buy these cards just to collect them. I don't think I've actually played a game for a while. But like I said, these starter decks, they're meant for kids. They're meant to like draw people in. They're not that good. I wish they were a bit better, but they have slightly improved. Taking a look on the front here, we of course have our main man Charizard. Charizard, as I said before, is one of the 4 most popular Pokemon in the game. Its complement deck is Blastoise, which I'd say is probably a tier 1.5. So it's like slightly below Charizard, but above most of the other like super popular Pokemon. But this is what you're typically going to see on the front of these starter decks, is you're going to see fully evolved starter Pokemon, because people really like the starter Pokemon because it's the first ones they get in each game, or it's going to be legendary Pokemon, like the ones you see on the front of the box, or it's going to be occasionally get fan favorites like Luxray, or generation ambassadors like Lucario. Generation ambassadors is the term I use for Pokemon that were revealed to preview the next generation. But on the front of the box here, it's actually kind of an odd, like, trapezoid shape. This is something that is unique to Pokemon. I'm not entirely sure why they do it like this. It's an odd shape. It's a bit difficult to stack at times. I guess it's so that you don't have to turn it too far to see that it's the Sun and Moon Relentless Flame theme deck with that little yellow border here, which is the little yellow border here. It's weird though, because the team up set introduces the new team up Pokemon cards, which are like super powerful, like they are a GX's GX. Like they're worth 3 points if you defeat them, 3 prizes. You get 6 prizes in a game, and you pick 1 prize each time you knock out one of your opponent's Pokemon. GX are worth 2, and team ups are worth 3. They are, however, stronger to compensate for that. But yeah, everything is like sloped. It's a bit kind of strange, and this is actually the first time in a while that I've seen a monotype Pokemon deck. Like, Pokemon starter decks have traditionally been dual type because of the original firefighting starter, which was meant to be split in half amongst 2 players. And 6+ play this deck online, and of course we have a brief window into the card. We don't get to see everything that Charizard does. We do get to see Charizard 150 points, and that the card is holofoil inside, although, like I said before, leaving these cards loose also lets them bend a bit. But we don't get to see, we'd have to like peek down to see what Charizard can actually do. Charizard has traditionally been a card with a very strong but very expensive attack, and I believe that this is supposed to be the same way. That's how Charizard cards tend to be. On the reverse here, we of course have the Ken Sugimori artwork, the fire red official artwork up here, as well as down here. It's a very Kanto center deck. Like, all of these Pokemon are Generation 1 on the list here. I guess Team Up is also supposed to be a Generation 1 theme. Anyway, moving on. One thing I do have to note is that it may look a little bit bland to have this sort of light gray with the black text, but it is so much easier to read than the back of that Yu-Gi-Oh deck. I don't know who approved the white text with the white outline on the white backing for that Yu-Gi-Oh deck, but that was a nightmare. It does mention the strategy of the deck. The strategy of the deck is keep feeding Charizard enough fire energy to create an unstoppable continuous blaze ball. Now, continuous blaze ball, that sounds familiar. I feel like we've seen this Charizard before, and I'm actually seeing reprints of a lot of old cards, and that's going to be kind of interesting to go over. In this deck, you'll find a 60-card deck, a card checklist, a metallic coin, a 2-player playmat, and rule sheet. Uh-oh, that's not good. A code card to play this deck online, a deck box, and 1 quick guide to unlock the strategies within, and damage counters. And each player must have a 60-card deck to win. Okay, so it's a 2-player mat. That's not as... it's a 2-player mat with the rules printed on the back. I cannot stand when the rules are printed on the back of a game mat. Normally I can't. It's a 2-player mat though, so between 2 players, if each of you buy a deck, you have 1 mat to play on and 1 mat to use for rules. Still, I'm not a big fan of that. I either throw in 2 of the mats, 2 half mats I still think is better than 1 full mat, although the full mat I think is designed to have 1 set up for Charizard and 1 for Blastoise. Anyway, like I said, looking on the back here, one thing that they used to do is they used to give you just only one-ofs of some of the really good cards. Like they would only give you 1 copy of Fairy Circle and 1 copy of Aromatisse in the Xerneas deck, which for the longest time was considered one of the better starter decks. This seems to be a recent change, but everything is 2 of or better. Another thing that they've improved on is that the Pokemon are all fairly well contained. You have Charizard, Charmeleon, and Charmander, Rapidash, and Ponyta. All of the Pokemon that can evolve have their full evolution list. I remember this was kind of something that they did with the original starter decks that, now that I think about it today, kind of irritates me, is they'd include, like, incomplete evolution lines and say, hey, if you go out and buy a bunch of cards, you can get the stuff that completes it. It's nice to see that they're focusing more on having complete lines and making sure that you get enough cards to play them with. Most decks tend to be a lot more severely slanted towards the final starters. They have evolution accelerators like Rare Candy, so this deck would probably look more like a 4-2-4 for Charizard if you're running the deck along with Rare Candy. It's a 4-4-1-4, even 4-0-4. But like I said, you only have to buy 2 copies of the deck to get everything, although why would you want to? Like I said, these decks are kind of junk. But there are some things I'm seeing in here. I'm seeing like a Pokemon Fan Club Copycat. If it's the same Copycat I remember from the Heart Gold Soul Silver series, that'll be fun. Timer Ball, Switch, Nest Ball, those are some really good and important Pokemon. Cynthia, I can't remember. For a second, I thought that was Lucamina. Lucamina's good. But it's nice that everything in here is a 2 of. Pokemon Fan Club, I know, is very good. Everything in here is a 2 of, at least. So we're not buying the deck for 1 card that we really need. Well, like I said, because the deck isn't very good. Now, let's take a look inside. Now, like the other 2 decks, like with Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh!, in order to open the box, you have to destroy it. But with Pokemon, it's even worse, because the only way to open it is by, like, gutting it down the side, like Han Solo with the Tauntaun in Empire Strikes Back. At least it'll keep you warm. I mean, I guess it is a fire deck. SM9, English PCD, Target Box, Relentless Flame Deck A. Okay. And here we go. So, inside, yeah, like I said, jeez, that's just carnage. So inside we get Charizard. Roaring Restore. Once during your turn, you may put 2 damage counters on this Pokemon. If you do, search your deck for up to 2 fire energy cards and attach them to this Pokemon, then shuffle the deck. Discard all Continuous Blaze Ball. Discard all fire energy from this Pokemon. This attack does 50 more damage for each card discarded this way. So basically, what it does is it does 20 damage to itself, and it hits for 130 damage every turn. There was actually a special fire energy for a while that, when discarded by a fire attack, reattached itself. If you could do that with this card, that would actually be pretty dangerous. But of course, we have our Charizard. We also have a code card on here, which allows you to play the deck online. There is a Pokemon online deck scene, and I've seen people even trade for those code cards. We get a Charizard flip coin. There are certain cards that have effects that require you to flip a coin, and this allows you to do that. This, I think, is more tradition than anything, because these days most people just roll dice. We have the rest of the deck contained inside a deck box, which features a full version of the art found on the front of the deck. Twice, actually. Once on the front and once on the back. We have the Team Up Continuous Flame. Unfortunately, this deck box is designed to hold the cards unsleeved, and that, I still think, is a terrible, terrible missed opportunity, Magic, as you saw, they finally upped their deck, their box size to hold sleeves, and Pokemon's done the same, but you have to buy like an Elite Trainer box in order to get that. Also, the deck does not come with a booster pack, which is a bit unfortunate. Like, I'm looking on the back and I'm seeing cards like Farfetch'd, which unless it like has the special ability that pulls everything together, it's kind of weird to have that in there. I mean, especially if you don't include a booster pack, because here's the thing, having a little junk inside of the deck actually, in my opinion, isn't a bad thing, because if you, for example, got this deck and think it's great, but there's some junk in there, but then you say, you know, like you buy a booster pack, you open it, you see, you open it up and see if maybe you get something amazing inside, and you want to include it inside the deck, then that gives you the chance to do it. You can easily see what you can take out in order to improve it. Like I said, these decks are a bit more aimed at, very much more aimed at new players than most other starter decks are. I wish they taught a bit more about card synergy. We'll have to see if they have them there. Aromatisse and Fairy Garden work together, which was nice. We have the Team Up deck. What's new in Team Up expansions? The Tag Team Pokemon GX and all the special cards, as well as the Prism Star cards, as well as a checklist for the Pokemon Team Up set. That's actually kind of interesting. I mean, they tend to include deck lists like this in the set. That's also really nice. I wish they had like some card previews on there though. But here, I assume, is our Relentless Flame quick guide. Okay, playing the Relentless Flame deck. Yeah, it doesn't look like a lot of the other... Oh, Queen's Call. Okay. Ah, okay, so Nidoqueen has the ability to... Nidoqueen basically gets you a free non-GX or EX Ultra Ball every turn. So what you do is you use Charizard to get out the energy cards. You use Nidoqueen to get out the Pokemon you want, and Charizard to get the energy cards. The other Pokemon? Huh. Farfetch'd, I guess, is in there to give you a little bit of draw power, and the other ones just use basic attacks. The only one that has any kind of supporting ability is Nidoqueen. Kind of interesting to see a Psychic-type Pokemon in an all-fire deck with only 20 fire energy. I guess the idea is that Nidoqueen uses nothing but colorless energy. They've been doing this a bit more. I like it when they get a bit clever with Pokemon and give them the ability to function essentially in any deck. But yeah, the only good cards in here are Nidoqueen and Charizard. Well, Nidoqueen's okay, I guess. I mean, it lets you grab it once per turn. It's basically a free Ultra Ball once per turn if you're not getting a GX. But I think it's most of this is going to be in the supporter cards. And they have another one for Torrential Cannon, which, Powerful Squall. Ah, so Blastoise basically gets a really good version of Rain Dance in this deck. It doesn't get any of the interesting support effects, but oh, it gets Pidgeotto. Oh, so Pidgeotto gets the ability to let you pull a card from the top of your deck. So Pidgeotto, I think, offers some better support than Nidoqueen does. But it's nice that, like I said, I like starter decks that give you an idea of how a deck can work and how a game can be played. I don't really see any good card synergies in this deck yet. I'll have to take a better look. But it's nice that they tell you how the deck is supposed to work. I think that's important for starting players to get a feel not just for how the game is supposed to play, but also how you can get cards to work together. I mean, there are definitely a lot of kids who like to play with their favorites, but for a while I actually had a deck, a fire deck, oddly enough, that I used as a teaching tool. Like, I would play them against this deck, and the kids would be amazed when their deck full of EXs gets beaten down by a deck that contains no EXs at all. It used some really obvious synergy, like it had the Miltank that got really big power, a really strong attack for 1 energy if you have a stage 2 in play. And it also combined Scorched Earth with Blacksmith. Scorched Earth allows you to discard a fire energy to pull it to your hand, and Blacksmith allows you to take that energy from your discard pile and attach it to the Pokemon you have in play, so those two work together. So we have a 2-player mat. Something that I do think is nice about the Pokemon mat is it does include reminders of the turn order and the status effects. So the things that you would normally look for and check on the check in the rulebook are listed on the mat. For example, we also have the prize cards, the bench, the deck list. We have all of that there. Those are the things that I think people would most frequently want to consult on the rules, which are printed on the back. I don't know if I like the rules that are like in the big posters like this. Like I said, I'm not really a big fan of printing the rules on the back of the checklist in general, but at least since it comes on a 2-player mat, if each player buys a deck, then you have a mat to play on and a mat to consult for rules. So it's not as bad. If this was like a 2-player starter set and they did this, then there would be problems, because you shouldn't have to stop the game and completely take it apart in order to check out the rules. And we have the damage counters. This is something unique to Pokemon. The starter decks come with the damage counters. Now, most people these days use dice, but not everybody always understands what the dice necessarily mean. Basically, each tick on the die would equal the number of damage counters on there. But in order to help understand what those damage counters mean, it's nice to include a sheet to help get people started. We also have a dual-purpose burn and poison counter. You get one for each side. I kind of wish we got a bit more than that. And it includes a GX icon. What you can do is once per game you can use a GX attack, which you saw on that Snorlax I pulled just now. But yeah, they have a special attack. You can only use one per game, and you have this marker to indicate that, and you flip it face down after you use it. It's meant to feel like the Z moves in Pokemon. Anyway, let's take a quick look inside the deck. I mean, it's nice that they put it in a box, because since you have to destroy the box it comes in, it's nice to have a place to put it. Although this also has that sort of convex, that sort of concave tray that the Yu-Gi-Oh deck uses. Anyway, we start off with a ton of fire energy. Oh, they've shuffled it together. Oh dear. We have some cards. Oh, your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. The timer ball. Flip 2 coins for each head. Search your deck for an evolution. Reveal it. Put it into your hand. Is that different from how it used to be? I don't know. Oh, that's a goofy face on that guy. Copycat. Yeah. Oh, it's even the same artwork as the original one. That's one thing that Pokemon does, is they will regularly bring cards back into circulation. You draw. Basically, you shuffle your hand into your deck and you draw for each card your opponent has. It's like N, only slightly less powerful. But this is a card they had in Heart Gold, Soul Silver. It was kind of fun. Wow, this is like these are like retro artwork cards. I'm seeing some of these cards, and I think I've seen this artwork somewhere before. Like that Charmander, I swear I've seen somewhere else. So this is like Generations if it didn't stink. Oh, the Call for Family Nidoran. That's the Call for Family Nidoran female. That's a classic. The Switch your active Pokemon with your bench Pokemon. It is the single most balanced card in the entire game of Pokemon, and I might do a video on that at some point. There's my other Charizard. There's a Nidorina. Family Rescue. Shuffle 5 Psychic Pokemon from your discard pile into your deck. Yeah, maybe not the best synergy outside of that. We have the Nest Ball. Search your deck for a basic Pokemon and put it onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. I assume that would also include, I don't know if Team Up count as basic Pokemon, but that would include a lot of GX. Nest Ball is... Nest Ball's gonna be huge, trust me. Brock's Grit. Shuffle 6 in any combination of Pokemon and basic energy cards from your discard pile into your deck. Okay, so here's some synergy. Charizard pulls the energy cards from the deck and then discards them. And Brock, if you use Brock's Grit, allows you to put those cards back into your deck for Charizard to pull it again. So there's a bit of card synergy there. That's nice. Moving on, we have Nidoqueen. Yes, Nidoqueen, who basically gets you an Ultra Ball every turn as long as you don't pull a Pokemon GX. Pokemon Fan Club. Oh, this is a new arc. Search your deck for up to 2 basic Pokemon, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. That is so very good. That is basically double Nest Ball, although it's a supporter card. You can play item cards like Timer Ball and Nest Ball. You can play those as many times. You can play as many item cards as you want on your turn, but you can only play one supporter. Supporters basically have much stronger effects. Like Brock's Grit is like a doubled version of, I think it's called Rescue Stretcher, that allows you to shuffle 3 of those cards in there, or Super Rod, I know does the same thing. I don't know if Super Rod's still around. I think that might be it. Oh, yeah, Cynthia. Oh, yeah, Cynthia. So she works like Luzamina. Shuffle your hand into your deck, then draw 6 cards. This is a good card. This is a really good card. all of the Professor Oak clones, like Professor Juniper and Professor Sycamore, pretty much outmoded by this. This is a staple card. So they did include some good staple cards in the deck, and they did have some decent synergy by combining Charizard with Brock's Grit. It'll also allow you to move some Pokemon into your deck if you want to use Nidoran's ability to pull a Pokemon out of the deck that got smashed before. You can shuffle the pieces of Charizard back in there if it gets defeated, and then use Nidoqueen to pull that back out. That is nice. So there is some synergy going on there. Professor Kukui, who is not that good. There's another Nidoqueen, Nest Ball, Switch, Cynthia. Cynthia! Isn't that like the doll that Angelica used? Oh, and then there's How. Oh, they changed his card art. They make him look determined rather than, frustrating and annoying like he really is. It's also like one of the worst supporter cards out there. Draw 3 cards. Oh boy. I'd rather draw 6, thank you. So yeah, there's a look at the deck. There are some synergies in there. That's nice. You combine Brock's Grit with Charizard. That's nice. And if Charizard gets defeated, you can use Nidoqueen to pull it back out. And of course, we have the code card right there. So that is what comes in a Pokemon deck. Like I said, it relies very heavily on brand recognition in order to sell itself, because otherwise it doesn't have that much going for it. It's actually like a mildly insidious part of, a larger whole, which is what you're supposed to buy the additional components for. It's although I guess that's not, it's not like called like, or I guess they call it a theme deck. I guess it's not like called a be-all end-all deck for a reason, right? It's a starter deck because it's where you're supposed to start. But yeah, brand recognition is super heavy on these. I do wish they could feel a little bit more like what you see in the game. Or do they mention that synergy? Yeah, they do. They do mention the synergy for Brock's Grit in the list. So at least they're trying to teach people who are just playing about some card synergies. I wish this deck had some more synergies they could work with. Right now, it's just Charizard with Brock's Grit. If they had another thing that like accelerated the evolutionary process or even offered some healing, that would be nice as well. But, it's a start. Anyways, that's a look at the Pokemon Starter Deck. Next time I'll come back and do one of these. Who knows what game it could be next. I've done the big 3, and I've done a game that I've been itching to talk about for a while, and like I said, it's nice that this version of the starter deck clearly has some chaff that you can take out if you get something good that you want to put in. I don't know how well Eevee and Snorlax would work in this deck, but it is interesting to see. They are considered basic Pokemon, so it is something you can pull with the Nest Ball and slam down on your bench. It also allows you to grab some energy from your hand to add it to the Pokemon. It says energy, so that could be anything. But it's nice that they've made a deck that has some clear chaff that you can take out to put in something better. So they do give you a window into how you can improve your deck. It's like, man, if only I had something to replace this useless thing. So that, I guess, is an advantage, especially for new players who maybe don't understand quite entirely the concepts of deck building. It is nice to see something like this. It's nice that they've gone to 2 elves of everything, but it is a little weird that they don't include anything that actually uses the tag team mechanic, even though they have the tag team iconography everywhere. Anyway, that's a look at Pokemon, and until next time, this is Kodak signing off.